Hello, fellow humans. Welcome to Shibari 101. My name is Shell Elizabeth, and today we're going to go over the basics of the different kinds of rope used in Shibari. Now, the first thing to talk about is the length of rope, because if you're going to get rope, you're going to need to get a set length. And it really depends on whether you're getting something a little bit more traditional or a little bit more Western. Because most vendors that sell pre-cut bondage ropes, they're going to come in one of two sizes. Most Western style ropes come in lengths of 30 feet. For example, this one is a 30-foot length of hemp. However, more traditional or Japanese or Eastern style is going to sell it in lengths of 7 meters, such as this 7-meter jute. And it honestly doesn't really matter. It's not that big of a difference between a length of 7 meters and the 30 foot. Naturally, 30 feet is slightly more than 7 meters, but you can always just add more rope. The reason why it's different, and there is an actual reason behind it, is when you're pulling the ropes, because naturally the longer the rope, the more you're going to have to pull through something. And we as Westerners have a longer arm span, and we're tying bigger people because traditionally Americans are just bigger than Japanese women, who would be being tied by these 7-meter lengths. And so the 30-foot lengths are much more popular with American retailers versus if you get something overseas, it's probably going to be 7 meters. Realistically, it doesn't matter. You can always just attach more rope if you run out. And if you have too much rope, you start getting creative and burning rope. So those are the typical lengths it's sold in. Now, they are also sold in different thicknesses. And there's usually one of two. The kind of golden standard is 6 millimeters, which most of mine are 6 millimeters. These are all 6 millimeters respectively, even though they're all very different ropes. You can get thicker rope. This is 8 millimeter hemp. I ordered it by accident from Twisted Monk. I didn't realize this was the second rope I ever purchased, and I thought that I had 6 millimeter rope. I was wrong. You can really side by side see how much of a difference there is between the 6 and the 8. And again, it is personal preference. If you're doing suspension work, the 8's really going to be a bit too bulky because it just makes for bigger knots because it's a bigger rope. Now, some people might like the feeling of the thicker rope, and that's totally fine. You do you. But I do find that the 8 millimeters is too thick. I definitely prefer the 6 millimeter, and you can get it smaller. I do have some ropes that are 5.5. And there are torture Saminawa ropes that are 3 millimeters for doing those extra painful ties. So the diameter, the length, it all varies depending on what you're looking for. Now, as for what is the rope made out of, you really get two schools of thought. There are people who prefer natural fiber rope, and there are people who lean towards synthetic ropes. And synthetic, I honestly would not be the person to give you a lot of information about it because I do not like synthetic rope. It's very slippy, so you have to tie the knots a bit differently. You can't rely on the friction of the rope. It does feel nice on the skin if you enjoy more of a soft kind of feeling, but you could also just get bamboo rope if you like softer things, but you want to stick with natural fiber rope. The other thing that I think draws a lot of people to nylon is it is much less expensive. You can get, I think this is a 30-foot length of nylon, and it was like maybe $7 or $8 versus your average hemp or jute is about $1 a foot. So you're looking at spending, I believe I got this in a set of 4 for $120. Which is a lot of money, especially if you're just getting started. So if you're just getting started in rope and you want something that's going to be economical but still a good product, nylon might be the way to go for you until you decide you want to switch to natural fibers because you decide rope is something you're going to use more often. Or What I would recommend is just getting a small length of maybe a couple different kinds of rope and really finding what works best for you. I'm glad I only ordered one of this 8mm hemp, because if I had a whole set of this stuff, I don't know what I would do with it. Now, as for the natural fiber ropes, you really get two main categories as far as suspension worthy rope. There are ropes that are not suspension worthy. This is going to include things like silk, bamboo, any of those soft, comfy ropes. Those are really more bedroom bondage kinds of materials. I wouldn't recommend using them for any significant weight-bearing ties. If it's going to be bearing any weight, you really want it to be made of either hemp or jute. Now, they can either come in whatever colors you want. They're all dyeable. I don't happen to have any natural colored hemp, but it's a very similar color to the jute. That same kind of khaki, brownish, lightish tan color. Now, the one big difference visually between the jute and the hemp, I'm not sure how well it'll show up on camera, but jute, this natural color, is a lot shinier than the hemp. The hemp can be a bit dull, particularly in photographs. So people that do a lot of rope photography almost always will use jute over hemp because it honestly does photograph better. But there are other things to think about between the two. Hemp is a bit softer than jute. Jute is a little bit more abrasive feeling to it. Now, neither of these ropes have noticeable stretch to them when you pull on them. They're not like cotton rope that stretches very easily. These are meant to hold weight, and so they do stretch a little bit over time. Like a 6mm rope is gonna over time slowly wear down into closer to 5.5mm. You can really feel the difference. Like if you use the same hank of rope for a couple of months and then bought a new one and put them side by side, it would be really obvious which was the new and which was the old. The other difference between jute and hemp is that they do wear very differently, and I mean over time, because rope is going to degrade the longer and the harder that you use it. When hemp starts to degrade, it starts to get a bit fuzzy. I don't have a particularly great example on hand because I don't really keep super old rope. This one's a bit older. And if the camera would focus, as I drop rope on the ground, and pardon my awful nails because I haven't repainted them, it gets a little bit fuzzy over time. This one's really not that bad, but the reason why this one I don't value as being particularly suspension worthy is you can see this is a very loose twist. This is hemp, but it's a very loose twist as opposed to the one that I use in my daily life. You can see it's much tighter. It doesn't come undone as easily. So I don't have a great example, but yes. So hemp will start to get fuzzy before it's gonna get degraded enough to actually break. So you can really look at an old rope and you'll eventually see like the bite, which is the folded part, the middle of this entire length of rope. The bite is always going to be what wears the most. And on this older rope, you can see it's where the twist is coming the most undone. And has a little bit of fuzz coming off of it. And you can tell it's starting to degrade here. Now, jute, however, as jute starts to wear, it's not really visual. An old piece of jute isn't going to give you a lot of visual cues before it loses its integrity. So you have to be more careful with your jute, and you have to be careful to keep it oiled and that sort of thing, because you got to be safe. The fact is you're working with natural fibers, and that's one reason why some people do prefer nylon, is the nylon is mechanically rated to hold X amount of pounds depending on which rope it is, versus when you're working with natural fiber ropes, it's a lot like woodworking where it's going to depend on the tree versus this is going to depend on the plant it came from. That being said, these do hold more weight than you would think. And it also helps that in Shibari you're always using the rope folded over, so it's always really going to be two. And any uplines in a suspension, you're never going to have just one. You're going to come back down, and it's going to have at the very, very least, 4 strands of rope holding a person's weight at any given time. So they are stronger than you would think, but the nylon is going to take a lot more to break than the natural fiber ropes ever would. So there are actually other kinds of rope you can get that aren't meant for human bondage, but definitely can be used for human bondage. There's one particular product that comes to mind, I believe it's called Aerosteel. It's a very, very thin, I'm not sure what it's made out of. It's some kind of polyester, nylon, perhaps Kevlar mix, and the stuff is rated to hold thousands of pounds on this very thin rope, and you can very easily suspend someone off of it, but it's going to be very painful because it's such a thin rope. Which is another reason why, as far as diameter goes, some people might prefer the thicker rope. If you're not into pain, if you're really not a masochist at all, you might not like the way that the thinner rope digs in when you put pressure on it. You might prefer the thicker ropes. There are ways around that. You can either do more wraps with the thinner ropes, which would be ideal if you didn't like the big bulky knots, but if you don't want to have to make a bunch of passes, you can just use a thicker rope. So between natural fibers and synthetic fibers, it really depends on your personal preference and what you're looking to do with it. You can't get natural fiber rope wet, so if you're going to be doing something like over a river, at home in the bathtub, anything like that, definitely reach for your nylon rope. I had an incident recently where I was doing some water predicament bondage, and we needed to get them out in a mild to moderate hurry, and so the person's foot went into the water with the rope still on. I ended up having to cut the rope off because I wasn't going to sit there and drag the person back up the hill with ropes dangling all over the place, and I could not get it undone. I had to cut it off because wet natural fiber rope is not a good thing. Don't let your natural fiber ropes get wet. You can wash them, which is a whole separate thing, but keep them away from water otherwise. So good for water predicaments, definitely your synthetics. And then another thing that you'll see different from rope maker to rope maker or rope top to rope top is what the ends are finished off with. Because you have people who really prefer the whipped ends, which here you can see the end of the rope has been sewn with a smaller thread. Let's see if we can get this to focus here. So the end has been whipped to keep the hemp from fraying with this small thread. But not everybody does it that way. There are people who will simply knot the ends. This isn't a great example because it's both whipped and knotted, but just a simple overhand knot on the end of the rope will also keep it from unraveling. But the disadvantage to that overhand knot at the end is as you're tying, there's a lot of pulling the ends through a band on somebody's body, and the knots can get stuck, which is a total pain and can be very obnoxious. So I definitely prefer my ends of my ropes to be whipped. I don't really like the knots on the ends. They kind of drive me crazy. And then if you don't like either of those options, another thing you'll see some people do in the spur of the moment is you can even just put electrical tape on it to keep it from fraying. It's ugly, but it works. And of course the nylon polyester blend ropes, you can simply just singe them because it's made out of plastic pretty much. So that is the basics between some of your different kinds of ropes. As far as another thing between, a couple more differences between jute and hemp I want to go over real quick. Jute normally has less of a scent to it than hemp. Jute, it still has a very slight grassy smell, but it's usually not even noticeable. Hemp kind of has that like barn sort of hay smell. It does smell fairly grassy. So if you're very sensitive to scents, you might not like the way that hemp smells, and you might prefer jute or a linen hemp blend, which is another thing that's available. And then as far as I already said that the synthetic ropes are going to hold more weight than either of the natural fibers, but between the natural fibers, hemp is a lot stronger than jute is as a plant. The fibers in them just hold more weight. So not only is hemp going to show its wear more visually, it's going to last a lot longer, versus jute might be a lot prettier in pictures, but it wears faster and isn't as visually obvious when it needs to be replaced. As far as price, they're about the same. So if you're not going to want to be replacing your rope very often, you might want to splurge for hemp rather than the jute. But if you're looking to do more photography style rope and you need that pretty sheen to it, you might prefer the jute. So there's so many different options, and there's so many different people that sell ropes. You can really kind of look around to your heart's content. I will link in the description the top rope buyers that I have bought from, and I'll tell you where these are from real quick. This nylon was from Agreeable Agony. I have used it, and like I said, I don't care for synthetic ropes. I got this for a particular purpose because I just needed orange rope for a specific photo, and that's why it's in this horrific color. This jute is from Douglas Kent. I actually really dislike this rope. I don't use it because Douglas Kent's jute is machine made in, I think, Malaysia, and the only scent this rope really has is machine oil. It's like machine oil mixed with a really light grassy smell, and I've had this rope for years and the machine oil smell just never went away. I have worked with both Moko jute and Agawa jute, and those are both way better than this stuff. This is from a rope maker who unfortunately no longer makes ropes, so we won't go over that one. This is from Twisted Monk. It was my accidental 8mm purchase. As far as the rope itself, there's really nothing wrong with it. It does come with the whipped ends that I like. In this case, it is black. It's a fairly decent twist to the rope. It's not loose. My real complaint about the Twisted Monk rope is it's kind of just overpriced. It's kind of expensive. So Twisted Monk's okay. It's not a bad rope, it's just a little bit expensive. Most of my hemp is this rope, which is from Dejato, and again, it's not very economically friendly. He is also a little bit high as far as price range goes. But his product is definitely superb and holds up well every time. I've never been disappointed with rope I've bought from him, and I have I have at least 8 different hanks of rope because all my this red and my pink hemp is from the same person. So that is a peek into my rope kit and what I currently have on hand. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments down below. If you have any things you'd like me to specifically go over in the Shibari 101 series, please do ask, and I will do my best to perhaps make a video for you. And if you're not already, do subscribe to my channel to see more things like this. Some things not like this. You never know what you're going to get with me. And I will catch you next time. Bye!